to the entertainment Talking Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into a couple of topics that came out yesterday. I had a lot of things to do yesterday around the house. Otherwise, I would have had it up in a more timely manner. But I still wanted to give my opinion on some of the things that transpired yesterday for the New York Giants as they made two moves. Nick Gates, of course, was on the final year of his undrafted free agent contract, in which he was only making $650,000. And he signed an extension that could pay him upwards of $10 million over the next two seasons. Now, that goes through to 2022. The details have not come out yet. I'm not sure if it affects this year's cap or it's going forward. But to me, that may signify that Nick Gates may have a more expanded role than I initially anticipated coming into this season. Of course, after Nate Solder decided not to play football this year, I thought that Cam Fleming was the far and away favorite at the right tackle position, at least to start the year, due to the fact that he's making $4.5 million. And he still may be, but Nick Gates could compete at that position. Of course, Nick Gates will not be competing to start at the guard positions, but he's certainly in the race at that center spot between him, Spencer Pulley, and Shane Lemieux. And the fact that the New York Giants extended him and gave him a decent amount of money, you would think it would be to have Nick Gates start somewhere, whether it's at the center position or the right tackle spot. And we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. I'll dig a little bit further into that after I get through the details. In addition to that, the New York Giants brought in another undrafted free agent wide receiver. Of course, they lost Sills to the COVID virus, at least as of now, as he, tested positive, or someone that he was connected to tested positive, and he was put on the list. So maybe that had something to do with the reasoning why the New York Giants went out there and got Tony Brown. But when I looked into Brown seems like a good find by the New York Giants, and the only reason he was cut by the Cleveland Browns is because of the new rule where you have to cut down from 90 to 80 before the start of training camp, and they didn't think he would have a great shot at making the roster. And there it makes sense. They have a ton of talented wide receivers with Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Maybe with the New York Giants, he could get an opportunity. He's got some hype, and he was very productive last year in his senior season at Colorado, opposite Laviska Shenault. Shenault, of course, was an early second-round pick, was even being mocked in the first round by a lot of people before the combine, in which he slightly disappointed, which is what Tony Brown did too. Otherwise, he probably would have been drafted. But he was on par with Shenault. Him and Shenault had almost identical numbers last year for Colorado. But let's jump into some of the details about both of these players. The first thing we're going to start with is Tony Brown and the numbers that he put up last year at Colorado. As you can see here, he played at Texas Tech for 2 years, from 2015 to 2016. He had a decent rookie year. Then he saw, from what I read, he saw less playing time in 2016. Sat out 17, came to Colorado in 2018, where he didn't get a lot of burn. And then last year, his senior year, he finally broke out with 56 catches for 707 yards and 5 touchdowns. If you put that opposite Shenault had about 750 yards and 4 touchdowns, I believe. Him and Shenault were almost identical in terms of receiving yardage and touchdowns. And like I said, he's a big-bodied kid who could go up and catch the 50-50. That's what he's known for. He made a lot of tight window throws, according to some of the things that I read. And that was one of the things that he vastly improved on throughout his time with Colorado. Now, why he went undrafted? Well, part of the reason is because, he was an unknown before last year. But an even bigger reason was, if you look at his 40 time, he ran a 4.65, which is, underwhelming for a wide receiver that isn't that known to begin with. He had a 33.5 on the vert, 119 on the broad, 4.27 on the 20-yard shuttle, and a 7.21 on the 3-cone drill. So he didn't have the most spectacular combine. One thing I will say at his pro day, take it for what you will, he ran a 4.49. Next thing we're going to bring up. The California native is a solid route runner who uses his frame and physicality to box out defenders and win 50-50 jump balls. However, as evidenced by his 4.65 40 time in the 40-yard dash, he lacks long-range speed that many teams covet. In the NFL, the former transfer likely translates mainly as a possession receiver who can serve as a big-body target in the red zone. Brown also has sneaky explosive ability. So there's some of the things that were written about him, and then also this as well. The fact that their production is so similar, in this article they're comparing him to Laviska Shenault, his teammate at Colorado who went number 43 overall, begs the question of why Brown isn't on more people's radar. He went 9 for 9 against Arizona State, getting an absurd 3 touchdowns for a 100% reception rate. On the year, Brown only has 2 drops on 64 targets. that was at that point in the season in which he had 3 touchdowns. I think he finished the year with over an 80% reception rate, balls thrown his way, something ridiculous like that. Against Arizona State this year, all 3 touchdowns were well earned. One of his touchdowns, Brown was tangled up with a defender and makes a contested catch. This play stood out to me as his touchdown is what NFL teams are looking for when it comes to a wide receiver. A guy who can catch under pressure and a defender pressuring or holding on to you. This year, Brown has looked incredible regarding that aspect. And then later on in the article, it went on to talk about how in the past, he wasn't very good at that. This is the contract extension for Nick Gates. The Giants have agreed to a 2-year extension with offensive line Nick Gates, who started 3 games last year. The deal has a base value of $6.825 million and could max out at $10.325 million, obviously if he hits incentives. A former undrafted free agent who spent his first year on IR, Gates cashes in, and for him that's a lot. He was only making $660,000 this year, which for a normal human being is a lot of money, but for an NFL athlete, that's basically a league minimum. Now, even if he doesn't hit his incentives, over the next 2 years, he's going to average out at about $3.4 million if the Giants decide to hold on to him, with the ability to hit over $5 million on average if he hits his incentives. So with that contract extension, it begs the question, what will Nick Gates' role be this year? Then I wanted to pull this up, some of the quotes that came out of Nick Gates' mouth. If that's where the team needs help, I'm ready to step up. The mental aspect is really the main load of a center. It's mostly a help position, but you have to point out where everybody goes and make sure everybody is on the same page. We'll see when I get live reps with guys lined up 3 inches from me. That was Gates talking about the possibility of playing center for the New York Giants, and I love to hear that. And it was part of the reason why I've been so outspoken for why I think Nick Gates may be better suited for the New York Giants to start on the bench because of his versatility, his ability to play all 3 positions. But with this contract, it leads me to believe the Giants at least think there's a strong chance he could be starting, whether it's at center or right tackle. Then finally, the thing you love about Nick, and this is Joe Judge speaking, the thing you love about Nick is just how tough he is. Because it's a fist fight in there. Gettleman said previously, my mistake. History tells you that the toughness of your team is really, really indicated by the toughness of your offensive line. And we all know that Dave Gettleman is all about the hog mollies and all about the offensive linemen. And Nick Gates is one of his undervalued finds, the undrafted prospect who really stood out for the New York Giants over the last couple of years when given the opportunity. He graded out very well at both the tackle and the guard spot since he's been in the NFL, specifically last year for the New York Giants, and he's a fan favorite. Yeah, I talk to Giants fans all the time. They all really like him. So I'm happy to see him get the extension, and maybe they use some of the cap space that was allotted to them because of the Nate Solder, and that's why they went to do this, because they thought that Nick Gates was in the long-term plans, so they figured they'd get it out of the way. At the end of the day, it's a couple of $1 million. I like the move, but to me, the real story here is, does this mean that he's going to be starting? I thought the right tackle spot was kind of up to him and Cam Fleming. I thought Fleming was the favorite due to the fact that the New York Giants went out there and gave him $4.5 million, and due to the fact that he started at the tackle position for a number of years in the NFL. Nick Gates still has limited experience. This certainly does not hand the job to Nick Gates, but I would think it shows more confidence from the New York Giants that they think he could be an impact offensive lineman, not just this year, but for the future for this football team, whether that's at the center spot or the right tackle position. Shane Lemieux, of course, like I said, will be competing for that spot as well, along with a guy who's done it before with Spencer Pulley, and that's not even including the possibility of John Halapio. As far as Tony Brown goes, it's another name that you throw in the hat. The Giants have a number of undrafted free agent wide receivers, including Derek John, Benjamin Victor, and along with a number of others. But I think he gets this opportunity due in large fact to the fact that Sills went down with the COVID testing, and in addition to that, the Browns couldn't afford to keep him on their roster. But seems like a guy with a lot of potential who busted out last year for Colorado and was definitely worth a flyer by the New York Giants, and he does possess some height, something that the New York Giants receiving core lacks at nearly 6 foot 2 inches. So we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.